Now to Russ.
So for all the pre-show haters out there, this is gonna start off non-hockey, but I'm gonna work it into hockey. All right. So we heard yesterday that the NFL, the behemoth, the 900-pound gorilla, has decided to now have 2 games on Christmas Day, which essentially screws the NBA. My whole thing about this is the NHL has always been very just meek about taking over any kind of available days when people are home and could watch games, except for New Year's Day. I still contend Thanksgiving Eve is an opening because there's 3 games that day. Usually by the third one, people are weary. They're traveling home. They're going to sleep, or they want to watch something else. They've watched enough football. And I think if you gave NHL fans an option, they'd watch it. And like Mike and I have said, you could do just Canadian if you wanted, and you would get that part involved. I don't understand why the NHL doesn't branch out into other days when people are obviously home looking for things to watch. But the NFL gets it. And the NFL was like, we don't care that the NBA is doing this.
Right.
They do them at their own game. The NHL never tries to do that. Ever.
Thanksgiving Eve is a really big night for reunions, like for bars. Like a lot of people, like when people come home from college for Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay, yeah. Right before that, a good viewing audience.
Go out, and there's huge parties. So it's a real big party night.
But the NHL plays on the Wednesday before American Thanksgiving. They do.
No, on Thanksgiving Eve, the Thursday.
Thanksgiving is the Thursday.
Thanksgiving is the Thursday.
You said Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday is Thanksgiving Eve.
Oh, no, but I'm talking about the night of Thanksgiving. Whatever.
Oh, the night, Thanksgiving evening.
Not like Christmas Eve.
Oh, Thanksgiving evening. Oh,
the evening of Thanksgiving.
Like I said, I mean, I would have that as hockey day in Canada, because that is not Canadian Thanksgiving is our Columbus Day. Oh, excuse me. That's right. I'm sorry. That's offensive. But why not have three Canadian games, because that's not for Thanksgiving. I would think that would be a great idea.
Yeah. The last thing Chris Thomas put it, that the talks for the Capitals and the Wizards to go to Virginia are over. I thought that deal was dead before it started, even though others disagreed, because there's a lot of traffic.
It's not over.
It's over.
It's not over.
It's dead.
It's not. It's not.
Why don't you think it's over?
Why do I think it's not over?
Yeah.
Because they're right now they're playing for a better deal from Virginia. Young and the governor is trying to get them out of Washington. Unless Washington, D.C. is going to pony up a better deal.
They already got a certain amount agreed on that they didn't do before, and I think that is the actual.
Okay, if that's the case, if they got a better deal from DC, then fine. But they weren't going to get it. It sounded like Leonsis was trying to get a better sweetheart deal from the state of Virginia, and they basically had set a certain. It was sort of like a Vegas scenario, Russ, with Oakland. It's like they kept pushing.
Like I said, it was not that far away. It was in a high traffic area. It didn't make sense. And it also seemed like the Lighthouse Project. Like, hey, they were more interested in everything around it except for the actual teams.
I don't disagree with you there.
Yeah.
All right, here goes, guys. Ready? Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, March 27th, 2024.
I'm Michael Agello, and you're not.
I'm Pete Tessier, and work hard and don't be a rich hockey player, Winnipeg.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology, not touching it.
Nope.
Adam Eklund, you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzzcast.com. This is the podcast that comes to you to bring you all the comings and goings in the hockey world. And I want to say something. I threw it out there, and I don't know. A lot of people were afraid to bite on this, but I thought last night was the most exciting night of hockey we've had so far this year. If you were
good, there were a lot of good
sitting back and watching the games were phenomenal. Like, they were phenomenal. Like, almost all of them. I mean, remember the Buzztron picked the Flyers to lose the Rangers in overtime. Russ, remember that?
Did Buzztron tell him to put an injured player on the ice and along 3 guys? No, but the Buzztron knew, I guess.
Buzztron knew, I guess. But and it picked Boston to beat Florida in regulation, which I didn't think was going to happen, but it did somehow. But the Buzztron got toasted last night, went 4-8 overall because of all the crazy upsets and all the different things. And that Nashville game, that was the game.
Listen, that's what shows Nashville's for real. Like I told you, I bought into them a couple weeks ago, and they are definitely for real.
They're 100% for real, and that building is 100% rocking. Like, it's just That place there's nothing like it. If you ever get a chance, everyone out there must go to Nashville to see a hockey game. It's just, there's nothing like it. And that building last night was insane. And they come back and they score late and they take the lead to win. They win the game. They keep their 18-game streak alive. And Russ, do you think if they beat if they were to go longer than 35 in this, that they should get their record? I do.
Longer than 35.
The Flyers had a 35-game undefeated streak.
Right. Yeah, that they do. Yes. I mean, because
I think
the Flyers included ties, didn't
ties.
it?
It was 25 wins and 10 ties. And to me, and now, just because you have, non-ties or whatever, and they actually lost, I still think getting a point in a game is the same thing. I think
it's the same thing. I think I agree with you on that.
They're halfway there now.
Yeah.
That's
incredible. Barry Trotz has done everything right. Same way Joe Sakic did everything right eventually in Colorado that first year. After a while, you couldn't count that. He's doing everything right. Like, everything's coming up roses for them.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, 100%. Let's talk about, and then the Winnipeg Edmonton game, Pete. That was another burn.
I called that one because I said I called it on Sirius because they were like, well, they were talking about all the good games, and I said, and they asked me about Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And I said, Winnipeg's really hurting. I said, but I'll give them credit at least if they can get to overtime. If they lose in overtime, I'll say, okay, maybe they're improving on this swoon without their coach. And I don't know how Pete feels, but that's the way I felt before that game went on.
Good, Pete.
Where do you start?
It was a game. It was a game, and it was like you lived a lifetime in that game.
Well, exactly. And you know what? Congrats to Zach Hyman for scoring that goal, because no one deserved a goal in face of stupidity more than he did. Because I actually cheered. I think but that's a whole other issue. I think one of the things that's really discouraging about the Jets right now is there is some systemic communication problems on the team, on the ice. If you look at that goal, somehow Scheifele and Pionk get confused. No one talks to the other about who's a switch to. And if you see the replay of that, you got to watch Kyle Connor coming back. The guy who caused the turnover in the offensive zone literally skated back like he was going, like it was the whistle had blown. It was a TV timeout.
I saw that.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
The fan base in Winnipeg, or at least those who are concerned, are literally at their wits' end with Kyle Connor right now.
Yeah.
He can do no wrong. He never gets moved. The coach has this honest belief that when times get tough, you must keep Kyle Connor on the top line.
Right.
There was literally commentary going on last night I saw between Edmonton fans asking people, Nick Ehlers is your best zone entry person. Why is he never getting the puck? All these questions. People from other fan bases can see the problems in the Jets. Yet somehow between four coaches, they're oblivious. And these are like, I'm glad they came back and won. They got a little lucky. The officiating was not good again. And
it seemed like it was bad.
And I think not just because it happened to both teams, because you know what? They got a penalty in the last 2 minutes of the game when Nugent Hopkins took the penalty, but it was a Jet stick that did the high sticking. The officiating again in the NHL this year has proven time and time again that whatever is going on from the top down is not improving the experience in the game, and everyone should be upset about it. It's brutal. But that's a whole other that's a whole other
that's a whole other show, man.
That's a whole other show. But it's rearing its head over and over and over again. You know what? I liked 60% of the Jets game.
Yeah.
The other 40, it was really bad, and it was the same stuff we saw on the road trip out east. And maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't over time.
They can't really win without bonus then.
Sorry?
They can't really win without bonus then.
Well, I don't know if they can win with them.
I know, but he at least is a strong presence. Like, they're clearly still have problems, like you're saying. So, like, bonus is the only guy that maybe could get it close enough that they could, do something. But
do you really have that big of a difference, though? I mean, like, this is like, I'm kind of with Pete on this. I mean, I don't think it really matters.
Bonus can adjust the lines. He keeps going back to the same things. Like
Right.
it's he's the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I could do anything better, Tim Park.
Thanks.
but
The chat room are calling for Pete to be the new GM, by the way. Just
the point here is you have to be willing to take a risk when none of your plans are working. When nothing's working, that's when you take a risk because you got nothing to lose.
Right.
And then figure it out. So switching people for switching out lines for a period. Well, if you see some positive results, you got to stick with it for another 2 games. You got to learn this.
Yeah.
So injuries force coaches to make changes. Well, if you're forced to make a change, you're really not being very progressive. And the Jets need some progressive thinking right now to get out of this. I don't know if it's coming.
Yeah. I was so happy when they took the lead because the Buzztron had the Jets to win that game.
Yeah.
And that was kind of one of the upsets it had of the night. I thought, I considered that kind of an upset, even though it wasn't a big upset. But yeah, that game and the Flyers Rangers game, very similar, down the end stretch
with skelter. I mean,
trading goals back and forth. Yep. The whole 9 yards. I know it was.
Again, the big thing with that Flyers game, besides the mess up in overtime, is Torts not coming out to even talk about it. And again, that is something where the league now needs to do something because here's the thing. You send your assistant out and he comes out and he says, we put Paling out there because he's our best 2-way player. He hasn't been their best faceoff guy in games because you're putting him against top lines and you can't play top line faceoff, right? So then they had Noah Cates out there, who maybe last year was their best defensive forward. He's not this year, and you had him out there. Yeah. Those 2 guys out there against the Rangers' best made no sense, and you knew it was going to be quick work. Yeah. And so that part I don't get. And again, Morgan Frost has a good game, and Torts likes Paling over Frost. And it just seems like he is always going to choose Frost last, no matter how well this guy does. It's crazy to me.
And Frost is doing everything he possibly can. You can tell to try to appease him. Like whenever you see Torts talk to Frost on the bench, Frost is like, "Yep, got it. All right, yep, I hear you. Like he's not giving him any attitude at all. And you can see. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at my wit's end when it comes to Torts. Like I said, I mean, if Danny Briere had read the landscape in terms of the message being consistent with practice, the first thing he needed to do was fire John Tortorella from the spot. Because, and I see this playing out. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I see this playing out that they miss the playoffs by 2 or 3 points. And if they do, that is the worst case scenario because you didn't not tank, but you didn't rebuild. You didn't take advantage of the fact that, you didn't play your youngsters. I mean, they're playing Mark Stahl and they're training for Eric Johnson and they're playing Delorier and they're doing all these things they're playing Garnet Hathaway in the top 6 and he's taking runs of Shesterkin, which is idiotic. I mean, and if they miss if they get in the playoffs and you get these players some experience, then that's a positive, even if you lose in the first round. But if you do everything that you've done and you miss the playoffs, that's a cluster. It's an absolute cluster. And there should be somebody should be accountable for it. But will the organization hold the coach accountable? Probably not. They'll think,
I looked at 2 things that kind of pointed out. I looked at the last 5 games.
Yeah. When
Travis Konecny is most effective is when he's under 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one thing.
Right.
I haven't looked at Cam York to see, but I'm going to guess after like the 22-minute mark, he starts making more mistakes. And these are reasons why the Flyers have these bad points in games is because they're overusing certain guys that Torts likes. Like Torts is basically like, I like chocolate pudding. I don't like anything else.
Right.
So he's just going to keep going with chocolate pudding, even though vanilla may be the answer.
Yeah.
And, again, a lot of these things that have happened this year have been because of injuries and because of just plain old luck that they've gotten some young guys. But I'll tell you right now, if Drysdale and any of the others come back, whether it's Sealer or Risto, although Risto they don't even talk about. So I'm going to say Sealer. If both of these guys come back, they're going to move Ginning and Adder out like they didn't exist, even though they've done a nice job here. And that's the problem with what Mike is talking about is because it's not a focus. It's just right now it's an end means to an end.
We have breaking news. The Flyers have signed Stu Bickle to a 3-year contract.
Is it true?
No.
Nothing would surprise me, Mike. Yeah, I'm nothing. I mean,
No, but it's just Torts playing a player who's not a good player because he's a Torts player. That's what I'm saying.
I agree with some of what you're saying, Mike, but I have to disagree with the fact that it's bad for them to make the playoffs at this point because
no, I'm not saying okay.
He's not saying it's bad to make the playoffs.
Bad if they just miss the playoffs, but you still. I do believe in the idea of playing meaningful games down the stretch means something to young players. I really do. And I think that's teams. The team just tank it down the stretch.
I think there's some good to it for sure. It's definite. There's definite good if they make the playoffs. And they play those young guys, but I'm telling you right now, he'll play as many veterans as he can if they make the playoffs, and these young guys are going to sit.
Wouldn't it?
I agree. They'll be around.
Wouldn't it be interesting if we have a scenario, and I don't even know who the Flyers play in the last game, but if there was an Olli Jokinen in reverse scenario where they lose in the last game by a point and miss the playoffs, that would be like the ultimate revenge for 2010 in terms of karma. I'm just saying right now, I mean, okay, they're in a playoff spot. They have a chance with 10, 11 games to go. Fine. I mean,
it doesn't matter, Mike, if they make the playoffs or not. Honestly,
it does. It absolutely.
It really doesn't because
absolutely.
If they make the playoffs, what are they going to do in the playoffs? I mean, they're going to go out and
no. You're missing the point. What I'm saying is, if they make the playoffs, then you can justify everything that's happened through the season. Okay, we made our goal. If you just barely miss the playoffs, as management, as ownership, you should be excoriated because, okay, you're saying you're going to rebuild, and then you finish in 13th or 14th place, and you're going to be picking in the middle of the first round instead of having a top 5 pick. That's a cornerstone player. You cannot pass those opportunities up.
At this point, though, when you're this close to the playoffs.
No, they're way past it.
It doesn't matter. I mean, it's like if you're going to be one of the worst teams in the entire league, yeah, sure. But if you're this close to the playoffs at this point, just playing meaningful games is as important as going into the playoffs and getting smoked in the first round. I think that I mean, I don't know if anyone. No, Mike's not right on this one. I'm sorry, he's not, because listen, Briere's done everything he can to help this team tank. I mean, it's not like he hasn't moved players around. He hasn't
done everything. He didn't need to pick up Erik Johnson.
All right.
There's a few things he's let Torts still control the call ups. Like there's a few things he could actually have put his foot down a little more, and he definitely needs to do that next year for sure.
The Erik Johnson trade is the 2024 version of trading a second round pick for Brian Boyle, or trading a second round pick for Thomas Plekanec. You've got an 800-pound gorilla coach who's going to piss and moan.
What'd you give up for Erik Johnson?
Fourth round.
A 4th round pick, Mike. It's not like the same.
I mean, a 4th round is a 4th rounder, Eck. I mean,
4th round is a 4th rounder, but you owe that pick to the players who are working so hard. Like when you trade Walker out of that lineup, and you realize you owe that.
Here's my argument.
Let me just say this, and then Russ can add on to it. You don't trade for Erik Johnson because you play Adder, you play the kids. But they can't do that because they're going for the playoffs. Now, they traded Walker and they got the 1st round pick, even though they had to eat $4 million to do it. That was their goal. Fine. Wonderful. But the problem is that, you're trying to walk and chew gum at the same time. You're trying to trade a guy for a 1st round pick and make the playoffs. It's one or the other, folks.
No, it's not. It's not one or the other.
My answer for KW, hold on. Because KW is like the Flyers have 4 1st round picks in the next 2 drafts. Yes, but you want a lot of picks. Because just because you have 1st rounders doesn't mean they're going to all hit. So that's one thing. So every pick, they should have more picks than what they have, even though they have a decent amount.
You cannot just ignore what the players on the ice are doing. If they're
but here's the thing about the players on the ice. Okay. Yeah. How many of them are going to be there in 3 years? Because
you still can't just ignore it.
No, but my whole thing is, I'm going to ask you, what is more important, the players on the ice today or the players that are coming in 3 years with Mitchkov and everything else? You can't go full bore for both. Now, I don't think they went full bore because they would have gotten a backup goalie if they did that. But they pretty much did by just getting Eric Johnson and not removing other players like Lawton. Like if they got a great offer for Konechny. Like this is what is more important, a one-round exit and some experience for the young guys, or 3 years from now being a team that actually could compete every year and maybe can win a cup.
I don't think this is either or. I don't think that
I think there's a middle ground here in the position, though, and I think Russ brings up a really valid point. Is no matter where you are in your cycle of success as a team, you have a fundamental age gap that you have to look at of what's on the ice and what's coming up. Yes. The hardest part about hockey, and Russ, you cover a lot more sports than you can probably have some insight into this, is the draft picks in hockey really are a lot more of a lottery, in my opinion, than they are in other sports.
Sure.
In the NFL, you can draft a 6th-round pick, and it's potential for that guy to be starting on half the teams in the league the next year.
Sure,
in the NHL, it is so highly unlikely. Yeah. So if you know your talent and your talent pool is 3 years out, you got to maximize what's coming up. And the problem is you still have expiring contracts on the team that's now. You don't want to put roadblocks in, so you can't bring players up. You need to have turnover. So, but to your point, Eck, the Flyers, if they make it and they go for it and they do things, that's fine. It's a win. It's a short-term win, but you can't let the short-term win cloud the long-term process. And I think that's what Russ is trying to get to, because it's more about, because they're not going to be a Stanley Cup contender in the formation now, but they could if you manage this correctly. And that's the art of it all.
Right, which means if you want to get a number one center, you're going to have to package Konechny and Lawton and something else in the deal to get that. But is that more important to you, or do you want to just have these guys on the team because you like them and they're having a good year this year? And maybe
let me try approaching this from another angle for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Buffalo, Edmonton, Toronto. 3 teams that often tanked. 3 teams that often went out of the way to be very, very bad, so they could get, and they played bad games and bad season after bad season. And what happens to those teams? They eventually get good. They eventually get good players. But they also take a lot longer to do anything to win in the playoffs because they're in a situation where your team is used to losing, and losing is contagious. Let me finish, Mike. Okay. Losing is contagious. Okay, and what the Flyers are doing here is they're still making all these moves. They're still moving Walker out. They're not keeping these guys. They're still getting their first-round draft picks. But but they're also creating a winning environment for the Palings and the Frostes of the world. And these guys what?
Okay, first of all, you're using 3 examples, 2 of which are completely inaccurate. One, Toronto, they tanked for 1 year and they lucked out. They lucked out. They got the
they tanked for McDavid too, Mike.
Well, no, they tanked.
I didn't get him either.
Well, let me finish. They tanked halfway through the year and got the 4th pick overall and got Marner, and then they tanked the next year and got Matthews. They didn't do like an Edmonton owner tanked. The Oilers tanked for a friggin' decade, and the Sabres, they tanked twice. They went from McDavid, and then a couple years later they got a 1st pick overall with Dahlin, and then
you're saying they didn't tank. They still were terrible. Like the teams you're saying they didn't tank, they were still terrible. Why were they terrible? Because they were.
So here's what I'll say about the Sabres, Zach.
Yeah.
The first tank was the right one because that draft had those great centers, and that when Eichel when he left that franchise, that set him back.
Yeah,
no, I'm not saying, but those teams had less than the going on than the Flyers have going on right now, and it's impossible to sit there and take the Flyers down to that level of those teams. We're finding that out.
No, it's not, because I mean, okay, you do it for 1 year and maybe you luck out and you win the lottery and you get Celebrini. I mean, the Leafs tanked for a year and a half. They got Matthews. They made the playoffs the next year.
But when
they made the playoffs every year since.
Around for years, and my whole point is they're not a winning environment is not created.
And what perpetuated that losing environment? The fact that in 2007 and 2008 and 2009 they didn't tank.
No.
And they kept Matt Sundin around and Darcy Tucker.
Those players are gone, Mike. Those players are gone. Nothing to do with anything.
No, but I'm showing you the DNA of the losing act. They didn't tank. They didn't tank for Stamkos. They didn't tank for Tavares. And what did they do? They were mediocre for a decade.
Yeah.
You have to break the cycle of mediocrity, and you have
Thank
to
you.
But there's nothing wrong with establishing in the process of doing that. I don't think the two are tied together. You can have two channels in this, though. I understand what you're saying with that. You can work on the backside. I don't think every organization is able to do that, though, Eck. And that's the problem. There's too much noise in the air, and a good GM can separate the process from the noise. Hey, we're talking Philly. Trust the process, and they
haven't won
that in there, right? And you've got to be able to say, if the Flyers are overachieving, and let's say what it is, they're overachieving. If they do it, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
celebrate it, love it, and let it go. But don't let it change the direction of the underlying plan that needs to be had.
They haven't. Peter, how have they?
Big markets like Toronto and Montreal and Philadelphia have the advantage of being able to do something like Toronto did for a year and a half and come out of it, and then getting Matthews and coming out of it and being sick. Now, they haven't had playoff success, but they've been in the playoffs every single year since they drafted Austin Matthews. Montreal is starting to turn it around. Slavkovsky looks like he's a pretty good pick now. You're not going to get Mishkov for 4 years. You're going to wait around for that guy? I mean, I'm sorry, Eck. You've got to get a number one center and cornerstone players, and the only way you can do that is drafting them in the top 5 of the draft.
Right.
And make that happen.
But again, some of that's going to take one of these first-round picks, Travis Konechny, another veteran. But instead, the Flyers are going to sign Travis Konechny for 7 years, and then when Mitchkov's there, he's going to be limping around those last 2 years because they think they can do it faster. And there's no real proof that you can do it faster.
Yeah, and there's no shortcuts.
I don't know. I don't see any examples of teams beyond like the Penguins is an example of a team that's tanked and gotten better quickly. But I don't see that. I don't know. I think it's absurd. I think what you're saying is completely amateur and unrealistic because the reality of it, when you're in this position, you can't tell the players not to play hard. I'm
not telling them not to play hard.
Hang out to dry and not make a trade not trade a 4th-round pick for Erik Johnson because the team's worked so hard and to try to make the playoffs. They want to make the playoffs. These players want to win. You can't stop that process from happening.
Okay, so that 4th-round pick in Erik Johnson, and Erik Johnson's getting prime minutes, right? So let's say those other 2 guys come back. Okay, hold on. So let's say Drysdale and Sealer are back, and they put them back in, right?
Yeah.
So now Adder, Ginning, and Zamula, who are all in there, all playing well, 2 of them have to leave. Ginning is a UFA next year, and Zamula's an RFA. So how are you going to properly evaluate them when you're just going to put the veterans back in?
We don't know to keep Erik Johnson back in when those guys get healthy.
Oh, Erik Johnson's staying in the lineup.
We don't know that.
I do know that.
No, would be in the lineup playing so well. They also would rather have these players. If these players prove they're better than Erik Johnson right now, they're in the lineup.
Oh, that's not true. Mark Stahl wouldn't have played all this year if that were true.
I'm not going to sit there and say it's 100% true, but I'm sitting there saying there's a realism that you guys are totally missing that exists on these teams.
The realism that you're missing is, and if you want to take this little run this year, that's fine. But
you have no choice. You can't stop them from winning.
I'm not telling you to stop them from winning. I'm saying win with the young guys, and if you win that way, then you're really winning.
Right.
Most of this has been winning with the young guys for us. Most of this has been winning with the young guys.
They're not going to be. And they look. How many games has Adder and Ginning played? 10? Not even.
Yeah, but they're not where they are. They're not where they are this year because of Couturier. They're not where they are this year because of Atkinson. They're not where they are because of the veteran players.
Well, I mean, Forster had gotten a chance and he's done well.
Forster's done well. Konechny is not an old player yet.
Yeah, Tippett's past the prospect stage. They've screwed around with Frost. My point is, for every one young guy, maybe 2 that Torts wants to put in there, he's filling 2 other spots with veterans. And I'm surprised you can't see it, but that's
I can see it. I can see it completely well. But there also comes a point in time at which you owe it to those young players who are performing to give them the best team on the ice that they can to try to make the playoffs, to try to make the season worth something because they've given so much to this season.
All right, let me ask you this. So let's say this year they make the playoffs, they lose in the first round.
Yeah.
Does that mean they're making the playoffs next year?
No. It just means that this team worked hard enough to make the playoffs this year, and they're going to continue on. They're going to keep trading away draft picks. They're going to keep trading away older players.
Will sit on his hands next year and say, "Well, I know that we did well this year."
No. I mean, I'm not saying George is the long-term answer here at all. I'm not saying I understand where George does that. I understand you're right about that, but that's not something that you can. But you can completely.
The GM can control that. That's what a GM controls.
Right.
I don't think so. Not as much as you guys do. I mean, if they didn't trade Walker away, I'd be with you guys. But they traded away their best defenseman.
I'll give you two examples of the GM controlling the situation. When Tim Murray traded any goaltender who could stop a puck in 2015 to get the best odds of winning the lottery.
Because that team was awful already. This Flyers team had no way of getting that. They weren't that bad at the trade deadline.
I'm not even suggesting that. What I'm saying is, they didn't even look at what they could get for Konechny at the deadline because they're like, oh no, he's our guy. He's got a year left, and then they're probably going to sign him. But they should have looked at it because
there are ways to manipulate things. But the problem is that when you talk a game like we're rebuilding, and then you don't rebuild because your coach probably refuses to rebuild. Then you either do one of two things. Then you don't say you're not rebuilding, or you fire the coach.
I don't know. We'll have
one or the other.
We'll have to agree and disagree on this, Mike, because I agree. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying about Tortorella.
No, listen, I think we all have good points. I do, but I think the fact that we all have different points points out that the Flyers don't have one plan set in stone. They don't.
They have a plan. And they traded away youth. I mean, they traded away old players to bring young players in, and they've done that. It turns out their team just played better than they thought they would. They couldn't help that plan from happening. That's what occurred. So if you wanted them to suck more, they could have traded away Konechny for nothing. But
I didn't suggest for nothing.
Didn't do that. I mean, there's no reason you should do that.
You heard what I said. That was not for nothing. I was trying to get a number one center for.
Yeah, but you're not. But they did try to move Konechny in the summer. They tried to move. They tried to move Sandin. Remember Travis Sandin. Remember that whole trade? With what's his name? And in St. Louis falls apart. They tried to make that deal. But it's not like they didn't try to do these things. But to me, that's the point is that and it's anyway. We should move on. We should move on.
Fine. We can move on. We
should move on for sure. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Vegas for a second, because Vegas is someone mentioned in the locker room, and they seem to be they're set up to make the playoffs, and Stone's going to come back, and everybody's pissed off about that all over the NHL right now. But there is a possibility that they don't make the playoffs. Vegas has they really are. I mean, last night you saw the big holes they have, which are real holes.
Yeah.
And they do need Stone back in their lineup because Mantha is not Mark Stone, and these guys.
And they need Hurdle. They need Hurdle in their lineup too.
And Hurdle, none of those guys are Mark Stone, So the reality is that they, if they miss the playoffs.
But barring a major collapse, they're making the playoffs because they're 6 points up. They're 6 points up on St. Louis.
It's not over though. But it's not
over. I mean, and St. Louis. I mean, the other night, if you watched that St. Louis Vegas game the other night, oh my gosh, what a game! The Blues just hit. The Blues must have hit 20 posts. The refereeing, talk about bad refereeing. One of the referees got hurt in that game, so St. Louis is sitting there, and the 3 high sticks were missed. It was absolutely insane, and the Blues still managed to take it to overtime, and Vegas won it at overtime. But you watch that game, and you ask yourself, what's a better team? St. Louis is a better team than Vegas. They just are. I mean, and
at this moment in time, they are because of the goals in it.
Yeah. Right. And
because of the injuries.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that's my whole point, though. You're going with Yuri Patera. They could lose this 6-point lead.
Sure, they could, Russ. But what I'm saying is, with the equal amount of games, if you're telling me who I'd rather be Vegas. I'd rather be 6 points up than 6 points down.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay. I mean, that's obvious.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's I think the odds for St. Louis. I looked at Money Puck a couple days. It's not like the Buzztron 486, but St. Louis's odds are 4.4% of making the playoffs.
Yeah, but that's still they still have odds.
And that really
thing is
crazy.
The part that I buy in with Ek is even Logan Thompson has not been as good as he was a couple years ago.
Yeah. And Aiden Hill, man, he's definitely suspect. I mean,
he's hurt.
Right. Well, when he was playing, he wasn't playing that well either. I mean, Logan Thompson had basically taken the job away from him, and he's not playing the greatest either. So, I mean, the whole thing, there's a lot of problems.
This is the same thing that happened a few years ago when they loaded up. They didn't make the playoffs.
Yep.
But they didn't stop from loading up the next year, and they won the cup.
Stanley Cup. I know. So, who knows? I mean, they just keep loading up. So, they won the Stanley Cup at that point.
Well, some of the most interesting games I thought last night were the ones that involved the in the East. The Washington Detroit game. I know that realistically, the Sabres don't have much of a chance of making the playoffs. It's about less than a 2% chance, but they had to be tearing their hair out because Patrick Kane ties the game late in regulation, and then Washington wins it, so it makes it a 3-point game. And that's the worst case scenario, not only for Buffalo, but for New Jersey and for the Islanders who are trying to catch these teams.
Yeah.
The one thing he didn't want was the 3-point game.
Right.
That was the one thing. And then New Jersey, talk about it like a completely sort of totally disinterested team right now, even though Tampa Bay is only 4 points behind them. Toronto is doing load management right now. They rested Riley. They're not rushing Marner back. They're giving Edmondson a week off before the playoffs, Russ, because they don't want him to get dinged up.
I agree with that.
They're and New Jersey, they need that game. Yeah, they're trying to win. Not to say that Toronto wasn't trying to win, but there was they had 25 shots.
The worry for the Leafs, and I didn't watch the game, I just saw highlights. Mm-hmm. Joseph Woll didn't play well. That's the only worry.
Well, no, I see that was honestly because that's everybody looked at the score.
No.
I know, but okay. Russ, I watched the
Jack Hughes goal was not a great goal that he let up. He could have
the breakaway goal. Okay, yeah, but the
Luke Hughes was worse. I just telling you,
Russ. It was a screenshot through the legs of the defenseman. I mean, he didn't even see it.
So then, in your mind, the goalie never should stop anything.
No.
There's a million times when goalies can't see the puck.
No one sees the puck anymore. It's all about positioning. It's all about
and he was in the right position.
Mike, he dropped his head after the Luke Hughes goal. He knew he should have stopped it.
Well,
I know when the goalie.
When the guy scores from outside the faceoff circle, yes, you think that especially when your team is up 1-0 and you're out shooting them 25-8 in the first period.
Well, that's my worry for the Leafs is they still don't have a go-to goalie.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they can't do anything about it right now, Russ. And I honestly think that the go-to goalie for that team, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, is Wall over Samsonov. Samsonov lets in one bad goal, and you're going to have like PTSD from November and December where he couldn't stop a beach ball.
He's at least used to letting in one bad goal. I don't know how Wall's going to react if he gives up like two.
That's the thing. There's a lot of pressure on Wall, and I do think he's the better goalie, but I think
I think the thing that's unfair is the fact that they're not depending on him to be the starter. I think if game one was tomorrow, it would be Samsonov. But being off for 3 months and with the high ankle sprain and then being put back into this, it's
not great, but that's just hockey. That's the way it is.
Oh, I know, but I'm not saying it's not hockey. I'm just saying that there are not excuses, but there are reasons here. Now. The game that we haven't talked about yet that sort of infuriated me and also entertained me wholly was Florida-Boston.
It was an incredible game.
It was an incredible game, but boy, if and I know a few people who think that Florida is a paper tiger and that they're going to be a first-round exit, even though they've had a great regular. I don't see that, but I have a few people telling me that they think that that's the case. And I'll just tell you, last night was exhibit A of that because they had that game. They were up 3-2 in the third period. Evan Rodriguez, who could be one of the dumbest players in the NHL, shoots the puck over the glass, gives Boston a power play with 5 minutes left. Boston ties the game and then gets the game winner about a minute later. Florida gave that game.
Yeah, Florida gave that game away, but Boston tried to give it away before that. So I mean, the reality is
they didn't.
What's infuriating, and someone tweeted me about this because I've been talking about it. Charlie McAvoy is the best all-around defenseman in the league, but he can't win a Norris because he doesn't score enough points. We're back to that again. But I think you all agree if Charlie McAvoy is not there, the Bruins can't beat any of these teams.
He's the most important player on the team. I've said it before. I agree with that.
And the Bruins have the luxury of actually having 2 number 1 defensemen because that trade where they got Lindholm was out for a while, but ever since they got Lindholm back, I mean, he blocked a couple big shots last night. I mean, the rest of their defense, Grizzly, Carlo's a big guy, but Grizzlick and a few others, it's unspectacular. But having Lindholm and having McAvoy being able to play 25 minutes a night in a playoff scenario, and the thing that was entertaining about that game was, obviously Marchand takes on Nico Mikkola, who's got about a foot on him, and Mikkola tunes him up. Hampus Lindholm sucker punches Sam Bennett, and Sam Bennett's not somebody you want to sucker.
No, and he's a big guy. He's a bigger guy than you think. He's really wide too.
Yeah, I mean,
he's like solid.
Yeah, it was a very entertaining game. But I mean, honestly, for those who think that Florida is for real, that game really was a disappointment because they just
they don't have Barkov. I think and Ekblad. I think
Barkov is back. He was back.
Barkov played in that game, but he didn't play it his full time. He was back, but he wasn't his full shifting.
Ekblad's
not back. And the reality is, this is Boston. They're a good team too. You know what I mean? Yeah. Boston can do that to teams. They're 2 very good teams, and it could have gone either way. It was completely.
I'm not taking anything away from Boston, but when they're using Danton Heinen on the power play, something's wrong, and they are.
No,
I told you when the Devils traded Zacha, he was going to be good there. Zacha's reaching his ability there now, and that was a brilliant trade by them because he's really been a heck of a player. But
he's been great there. I mean, he really is getting everything they wanted out of him for sure.
Yeah, I do look at Boston's weird because I do think they're going to get eliminated at some point during the playoffs, but I do think they could go 2 rounds just because of the guys they have.
Oh yeah.
And they could give you a hard time no matter what team you are. So you could be the best team in the NHL, but if your game's a little off in the playoffs, they can exploit you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And one other thing, even writers in Boston didn't realize this, or at least one that I know. There was a video the other day with Jeremy Swayman, and I knew he was Jewish, but I didn't know he got bar mitzvahed in Alaska outdoors.
Well,
that's something, man. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
That's something even Pete wouldn't do.
When's his birthday, though? That's what it depends, right?
Yeah, what time of year it is?
Yeah, what time
I don't know what time of year.
That's the kicker. You're likely an August birthday.
That is a kicker.
I just thought it was funny that you said that.
No, that's very funny. I like that. I like that a lot. All right, quickly on the Buzztron tonight, just 2 games. I'll bring them up for you. So they're and it's funny. I mean, these are 2 games that I would like to change personally because I think it's wrong on both of them. But we'll see. Ottawa winning in regulation over Buffalo, and Tampa taking Boston in an overtime game. So
that would mean something because they'd still be gaining ground on the Leafs.
Standing room only in Buffalo for that one.
No, but what happens to the Leafs if they become a wild card team?
Well, then they play the second of the division winners. I mean, that could be right now since the top 2 in each division are so tight. I mean, it could be Florida, could be Boston.
Psychologically, does it affect them psychologically? I think what Russ is trying to say.
No.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
No, I don't
think so.
I don't think they want to do it on purpose, but I don't think.
No, but they've been in the spot like a long time, right? And I kind of wonder if they slip down, would that bother them?
Well, I think right now the fact that they've been without Marner now for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, Nylander scored his 40th last night. Matthews is leading the league with 59 goals, so they almost have 100 goals out of 2 players. And they're actually getting more production out of some of the secondary guys like Bertuzzi and Domi have been playing well lately. But last night they played a completely undisciplined and as Keith had $1 for every time Keith said immature in his post game.
Yeah,
and he was right. I mean, they played stupid. And
amazing how many writers. I didn't know he said that in his post game, but it's amazing how many writers wrote that.
Including me.
Immature was on every headline involving the Maple Leafs last night.
Well, I mean, when he says it 7 times in one go, I mean,
point. All right, so tomorrow night, 15 games. Tomorrow night, crazy night of games. I'll run through them real fast with Buzztron's predictions since we're not on the air tomorrow here. Florida in overtime over the Islanders. The Flyers over Montreal. Chicago.
I'm taking Montreal in that game.
Montreal in that game. Right.
And I think they're going to have a hard time in that one.
It could be. You might be right. If I was to think about it, it makes sense that Montreal would win that game. Chicago over Ottawa in regulation. Pittsburgh over the Blue Jackets in regulation. Go ahead.
I just said barn burner. Chicago, Ottawa.
Not the minutes on the crazy against. Toronto over Washington in regulation. That's a big one.
That's a big one because Washington definitely needs a point. I'm going to say Washington's going to win that. I'm going against the
Ovechkin will score 4 goals. He always torches the Leafs.
I mean, the Capitals haven't lost a lot lately at all, but
7-3 and something like that.
They might, they could be due. Carolina over Detroit in overtime. So Detroit getting a point out of Carolina. That's interesting. That's something. Minnesota over San Jose in overtime. St. Louis over Calgary. Winnipeg over Las Vegas. There you go. There you go. Winnipeg over Vegas. Pete
doesn't see it. He's shaking his head.
You don't think so?
Vegas will have to have some brain farts, but
I mean, the Buzztron is it's acting more like a Pentium lately. It is.
It's at 60% or 62% now. All right, so Colorado over the Rangers in regulation. Edmonton over the Kings in regulation. Arizona over Nashville.
No way. No way, Buzztron.
Now it's an overtime game, so Nashville would still get their point here.
Yeah, right? It's now we know the Buzztron is powered by one of those Coleco fantasy.
No way, Buzztron. Sorry,
I am not. Listen, when you think about what happens in hockey, right? The Preds just come back this incredible thing. They still get a point out of this. They go into Arizona now. They travel to Arizona.
Josh Stone with 5 goals.
The best thing that Nashville has to do is travel. If they were at home, I could see it. I don't know. I don't see that one.
We'll see. Anaheim over Seattle in regulations. Those are your 15 games tomorrow night. We'll see what happens. But
Anaheim over Seattle.
Anaheim over Seattle. Yep, 2-0.
I'm telling you,
Vancouver over Dallas.
Like 40% that night.
Vancouver over Dallas.
Vancouver over Dallas. Is that game in here tomorrow? Oh wait, I forgot. I'm sorry. There's another game. I forgot that. Yes, Vancouver
has a virus.
No, I just didn't see it right. Vancouver over Dallas in regulation. Yep. There you go.
That's fine.
All right. So we'll see. We'll check it out then. Remember, guys, thanks for joining us, Pete, as always.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for being wrong, Mike and Russ, as always. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We'll talk to you soon.